Want to know how many granny squares you need to crochet in order to make the blanket size that you want to make? I got you covered. Now this always blows my mind whenever I do this math, because when I think granny squares, generally I'm like, oh, I can make a couple granny squares, whip up the blanket real quick, no problem. I really underestimate the number of squares that I will need to make the blanket that I want to make. And I often end up making crib-sized blankets or lapgans or something smaller because, like, for example, this blanket right here that I made, this is 48 squares, and I made a lapgan sized blanket. That's a lot of squares. So that is one reason why it is so important to really do the math before you get started on your project. Maybe just make one square so you know how long and how wide your square will be. Then reference this chart, find out which blanket you want to make, and know immediately how many squares you're going to need to make in order to accomplish that blanket size. This will help on materials, this will help on cost, this will help on time, how long it will take you to make it. So much good will come from this information. When you first look at this chart, I started by showing you the very common blanket sizes. The receiving blanket being a square, the crib size blanket being a rectangle, the lapgan being a rectangular shape but going this direction. Then you have the green small throw blanket, the large throw blanket, the twin, the full, queen, and king size blankets. What I thought was really interesting about this picture, this visual, was showing you that a lot of these blankets are the same width, just different heights, or the same height, just different width. Right below that, I have all of the dimensions, the name of the blanket, the dimensions in inches, and then the dimensions in centimeters. So depending on which metric that you go off of, I've got you covered. What you may notice right off the bat is that some of these granny squares will not fit evenly within some of the dimensions of the blankets. Feel free if you go over dimension or are just under dimension, you're okay. I personally don't ever want to go under dimension. I would rather go over than under, just to make sure that the blanket is serving its purpose. All right, let's go ahead and do an example together, just so that way you have an idea of what I'm talking about. When we flip the page, you will see some formulas that I have put together to help you out. Okay, so for the formula, desired blanket width. So what blanket do we want to make? And I think for this example, I'm going to go ahead and make a small adult throw or small throw blanket. I'm going to come down to, well, what are the dimensions of a small throw blanket? Right here. So 52 inches wide by 60 inches long, or 133 centimeters wide by 153 centimeters long. I'm just going to use inches for my personal example, but if you use centimeters, it's the same exact process, just input the centimeter dimension. So, desired blanket width, so 52 inches wide, so 52 inches. And then the square that I'm going to make. Let's just say for example purposes that I'm going to go with this 6-inch wide by 6-inch long square. So it's 6 inches wide. 52 divided by, because this is a division, 52 divided by 6 equals, it's 8.67. So no, it doesn't divide evenly. So I have two choices now. I can either make 8 squares and make up for that remaining amount with the border and the joins, or I can make 9 squares and go over dimension, go over the 52 inches. And then I know for me personally that I will have met dimension, and I'm at least not going to be too small. I like to err on too much, so I'm going to go with the 9 squares. All right, next equation is the length. So now we know how many squares wide. I'm going to make 9 squares wide. How many squares long do I need to make? So let's go back to my blanket. I'm making a small throw, 60 inches long. So 60 inches. How long is my square? My square is 6 inches long. 60 divided by 6. Oh, this is an even number. I'm super excited. That is 10. So 10 squares. Now, how many squares am I going to need to make in order to make this whole blanket? So how many squares will I need to make? So I take the width number of squares, so 9 squares wide by the 10 squares long. 9 times 10 is 90. So I will need to make 90 squares to make this small throw blanket. Now I went a step further still, adding or knowing how wide we will need to make our border if we didn't quite meet dimension, like for example, this example up top. What if I did make only 8 squares? What if? Then I would have been below my dimension for my width. Okay, so how do I make that up? Yes, you can make it up a little bit in the join. You will get just a tiny, tiny amount of additional help in your width with the join, but we're gonna need to make up most of that in the border itself. How do I know when to stop the border? How long, how wide to make the border? Okay, so come to this example here. Blanket width or length dimension. You only need the one. So because I know I'm short on the width, I'm just gonna go with the width dimension here. So the width that I want to meet is 52 inches. The total square width that I accomplished, so if I only made 8, 8 times 6 is 48. 48 inches. So my blanket wants 52. I only have 48. 52 minus 48 is 4 inches. So I will have 4 inches that I need to make up for. This is page 3. This worksheet chart thing has 3 pages. This is the last page right here. And it says you will take that number 4, this number, divide it by 2. So 4 divided by 2 equals 2 inches. 2 inches is how wide my blanket border will need to be. So this right here, 2 inches. And that's how we will accommodate that total of 52 inches for our blanket. Now, yes, because we are going around, that 2 inches on the side will also be added to the length. 2 plus 2, so we will get an additional 4 inches added to the length. I have already met the length with my 10 squares. It was a perfect match. And again, that's when I will remind you that these dimensions are more of a guideline than they are a set in stone thing that you have to reach. All right, and then the last thing I have here on page 3 is just an input, a place for you to input all of your information. Blanket dimensions that I want to hit was 52 inches wide by 60 inches long. Now again, I'm using inches, but if you use centimeters, I have all of those numbers located here for you to reference. How many squares will I need to make? I found out that I need to make 90 squares. How many squares wide? Now this is going to be helpful and important when you are putting your blanket together, because you're going to have 90 squares in this example, and you can be like, oh boy, I have 90 squares. How many squares did I need to put widthwise and how many squares lengthwise? It will be a huge mess if you don't write this number down. So I have here, I wanted 9 squares wide and 10 squares long. So when I am setting everything up right before I join everything together, this is the process that I'm going to want to create. And that's it, guys. That is all that you need to know to help you find out how many granny squares you will need to make your blanket. And really, there's a lot of different blanket sizes that you can reference, and you have the power now to make whatever blanket size that you want to make and know how to do it. Feel free to print out as many of these chart/worksheets as you want. They are completely free on my website, again, crochetwithtiffany.com. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you have the best day, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye, guys.